Welcome to our special corner, a place where curiosity is encouraged to wander freely, giving your thoughts room to breathe and explore. Tonight, we'll venture into a question that might linger in the depths of your mind for years, quietly waiting, until one day, it steps forward, demanding your full attention. This isn't a question with an easy answer. In fact, some might prefer to avoid it altogether, since pondering it for too long could turn your perspective upside down. Yet this question has the power to tilt your perceptions, inviting you to interpret your everyday experiences in entirely new ways. The question itself is deceptively simple, but its implications can transform how you interpret almost everything. What if our existence on Earth was, in fact, a test? Not just a metaphor or clever analogy, but an actual test purposefully constructed, carefully monitored. A scenario where every decision, every struggle, and the very patterns of our lives are not only lived, but observed, perhaps recorded, reviewed, and even rated. What if a higher intelligence orchestrated this setup? Perhaps an ancient power once worshipped as a god or a civilization from the farthest reaches of the universe, so distant we'd never perceive their gaze. Or, and here's where the idea twists, what if it's us, future humans, reaching back through the intricate web of time or technology, fabricating circumstances for their predecessors and watching history unfold? Maybe this notion is vaguely familiar to you, even if you've never put it into words. Those moments when reality feels oddly scripted, when events seem to align with suspicious precision, when a person arrives in your life at just the right or wrong moment, or you're confronted by coincidences that urge self-reflection. Before we stray too far into what-ifs, let me pull things in for a moment. I'm curious, where are you joining from right now? Is this a well-known place, or somewhere unfamiliar on your journey? Is it morning sunlight where you are? Or have the shadows and stillness of night settled in? Despite being scattered across timelines, right now we inhabit a shared pocket of time. For some, this moment is charged with the crispness of new beginnings. For others, it's a gentle wind down at day's end. Perhaps you're listening as you settle down for a restful night. Let this be a soothing companion to those final hours. Or maybe you're starting your day. In that case, think of this as a subtle undertone as you step into the unknown. If you're the kind to enjoy deep, slow-blooming conversations that invite wandering thoughts, I'd be grateful if you supported this space, maybe with a like or a subscription. It would help this reflective corner find others craving thoughtful company at the break or close of day. With our pace set, let's walk through this concept together, unhurried. The idea that Earth might be a test isn't about quickly uncovering answers. It's about observing how your perception shifts when that question sits quietly in the back of your mind. We should first note that the word test triggers different meanings, depending on experience. For some, it's school, rows of desks, answer sheets, a clock's steady tick making each moment heavier. In life, the idea of a test can be much broader, something that measures lessons learned without your awareness, or gauges how you respond under pressure or freedom. In this thought experiment, seeing life as a test doesn't mean everyone gets the same questions at the same time. It could mean each person is handed their own version, shaped subtly by circumstances they may not even notice. You might already be recalling the delicately balanced requirements that make life here possible. The perfect blend of elements, the atmosphere, Earth's place in the solar system, not so near the sun that we sizzle, not so far that we freeze. The planet's magnetic field, its defense against solar tempests that could strip it bare, its measured orbit, the predictable seasons that allow planning and continuity. Astronomers refer to the Goldilocks zone, the slim area around a star where conditions allow life as we recognize it. But if Earth is truly a test, maybe these aren't just strokes of cosmic luck. Maybe they are the meticulously chosen parameters of a grand experiment designed to see how life responds to a perfect beginning. Which leads to another compelling question. If this is indeed a test, then what are the challenges being set before us? Are we being asked about our ability to endure, survive shifting climates, withstand natural disasters, or outmaneuver relentless plagues and diseases? Or does the examination probe deeper, aiming at morality testing our treatment of each other when resources grow scarce, or when we have everything we could possibly need? Is the goal to see whether we can find ways to work together, rising above language, cultural divides, and beliefs? Or is the real lesson something so subtle that it's never even occurred to us? An invisible factor that's the crux of it all? Perhaps you've wondered if there's any evidence of someone or something watching us, carefully taking notes. But if a higher power wished to monitor us honestly, they'd never make their presence obvious. They'd keep to the shadows, letting life play out organically. Or their influence might be so exquisitely subtle that we couldn't tell it apart from sheer coincidence. A change in weather that pushes strangers together. A twist in events that keeps you from following your usual path. It's tempting to dismiss these as chance. But from the test point of view, maybe they're meticulously adjusted variables in the grand experiment. Of course, these ideas aren't entirely new. Many ancient cultures and religious traditions taught that this life is a trial, sometimes to prove, if you live by certain moral codes, with consequences waiting beyond death. Other times as lessons for a soul that can be learned nowhere else. While details differ enormously, at the center remains the notion that our existence has purpose, appearing again and again across history. For many, this concept is comforting. Within the framework of a test, suffering is not without meaning. Every hardship might be a lesson, even if its purpose is unclear. Yet for others, the notion is unsettling, suggesting constant surveillance, invisible judgment, and consequences lurking at the periphery of our understanding. Whichever feeling dominates, it can subtly reframe daily living. The small acts of kindness, the private choices, the honest reactions to setbacks. Seen through the lens of a test, each of these moments seems differently weighted. It's also possible the true goal has little to do with any individual at all, but instead focuses on humanity as a collective. The test could be whether the species as a whole achieves certain milestones, developing sustainable ways of living, avoiding extinction by our own inventions, or learning to communicate without descending into endless conflict. If that's the setup, then every generation becomes another data set, another cohort in an ongoing, centuries-spanning survey. Look at history from this perspective. The abrupt, dramatic collapses and resurgences of civilization, the echoes of war and peace, the arcs of discovery followed by setbacks. It all begins to resemble interim reports in a single, long-running experiment, one that might have begun before recorded history ever started. Consider the phrase, trial by fire. Our species is no stranger to the idea of testing ourselves, constructing challenges for the sole purpose of pushing beyond comfort, inventing competitions with no required purpose except to overcome. If we willingly submit ourselves to trials for personal growth or amusement, it's not such a leap to imagine some greater entity conducting experiments on a grand scale. This is where things get even more intriguing. If this is a test, perhaps performance isn't judged by who gets the highest score. Maybe it's all about the process, how you approach difficulty, whether you cheat or persist, whether you face unknowns with bravery or resignation. In fact, simply considering, what if Earth is a test, could itself be part of that mysterious evaluation? If you avoid the question completely, perhaps that too is a result in the dataset. If you stop and ponder it, then what you do with that awareness is the next step. So as we journey deeper into the topic, let's continue to shift perspective, scrutinizing not just the stage of our planet, but how its challenges, its very history, and our instinctive way of seeing patterns might point toward a greater purpose. As you let the thought linger that Earth itself might be some grand assessment, something interesting happens in the way you perceive your surroundings. Everything familiar seems suffused with new meaning. The chair you occupy, the quiet routine of an ordinary room, the faint hum in the background, even the touch of air on your skin. Suddenly, these aspects feel ever so slightly staged, as if arranged with purpose rather than emerging by accident. It evokes that curious sense of entering a room you've visited countless times, only to spot a detail previously hidden from your notice. The world itself unchanged, yet your perspective transformed. That's the power of this hypothetical. It's not that you can confirm or deny it outright. Instead, once the idea roots itself, your daily experience filters through a different lens. The frustrating commute. Was it random hassle or an exercise in patience? The misfortune or barrier that appeared unexpectedly, just bad luck or a carefully placed obstacle? Even those people who seem to materialize in our lives at decisive moments, for better or worse, start to become part of the unfolding scenario, cast in roles we never fully understand. It's striking how naturally humans slip into this pattern of interpretation, without deliberate effort. When things align, we're quick to say, everything happens for a reason, or to tell tales about fate, kismet, and destined meetings. Whether we treat those stories seriously or not, they point to an instinctive comfort with the idea that life might be about more than random sequences of cause and effect. In the frame of Earth as test, those intersections and synchronicities may reveal foundational design hints that something greater is guiding the process behind the scenes. Yet the true weight of this idea doesn't come from the suspicion of being tested. It's the implication, a feeling that if we are being evaluated, then every aspect of our existence, good or bad, orderly or chaotic, has been arranged deliberately. Every disaster, every healing, each revolution in technology, every season of calm, and each eruption of chaos are all potential chapters in this ongoing evaluation. That's where curiosity edges into gravity, where the notion turns profound and pressing. But this isn't about conjuring paranoia or picturing unseen eyes behind hidden cameras. Instead, it's about letting your imagination zoom out so far that you see everything planet, ecosystem, civilization as a single, interactive system. Imagine Earth, not from the ground, but as if you floated above it. Swirling clouds, glimmering city lights in the dark, shifting weather, vast migrations, humanity bustling everywhere, every individual lost in their own narrative. If there's some architect, that being is watching it all, like a strategist analyzing a living simulation in motion. From this vantage, a new query emerges. If you were the one conducting this colossal experiment, what would you want to discover? Would you be searching for adaptability or the emergence of compassion and intellect? Would you care more about the resilience of individuals or judge the progress of humanity collectively? Dozens of targets could be imagined: moral growth, inventive power, capacity for peace, or some wholly alien trait yet unrecognized by us. Ancient traditions overwhelmingly centered their tests on morality. Many a worldview has regarded earthly life as a time of proving judging kindness, obedience to sacred laws, acts of courage, and the willingness to persevere when integrity costs the most. The prize: heaven, reincarnation, or a reprieve from suffering. Modern perspectives, especially those shaped by reason and science fiction, enlarge the possibilities. If an advanced civilization or time-traveling future humanity observes us, their interests may care little for individual kindness. Instead, they could be measuring how groups cooperate, how new ideas emerge under pressure, which societies flourish or perish, and why. There's a catch here. In many true tests, the deeper purpose remains hidden until the very end. You might think you're being graded for one skill, only to realize in hindsight that what truly mattered was something else. A frequent twist in experiments, games, or training. If Earth's exam works the same way, maybe the qualities we work hardest to showcase aren't the ones that matter at all. Another riddle arises. Should the subjects of the test even be aware they're being tested? Awareness can shift how we act, sometimes for the better, often in ways that try to game the results. This could explain why, if there is an observer, subtlety is preferred over showy signs. Or perhaps, simply suspecting you're being watched becomes a test in itself. Do you seek meaning, search for signs, try to outsmart the examiner, or do you continue on, unconcerned? It's even conceivable the test has tiers, each person scrutinized for private choices and endurance, while the larger arc of history evaluates the species as a whole. Will we destroy ourselves, learn to sustain life, or spread out beyond this single pale blue dot? If both scales are real, the experiment spirals into infinite complexity, our choices ricocheting through time, echoing in the collective outcome of our kind. Every boom and bust in civilization, every renaissance and catastrophe, each leap or misstep becomes another data point, another flick of the pendulum in this sprawling trial. Technology gifts new horizons and risks, cooperation is embraced or shunned, and our messy, hopeful, irrational progress sets the next phase of the test. And as the idea settles in deeper, it becomes impossible to ignore one unsettling detail. If this is a test, then it hasn't been made safe or simple. Any real examination is meant to push boundaries, to stretch limits you might not even realize you have. Perhaps there's a time limit you don't know about, or only a few make it through, with traps you can't predict and questions that seem designed to confuse. When life takes a sharp turn or deals an unfair hand, it rarely feels like part of a larger purpose, yet in the context of a test, even uncertainty and loss are data, measurements taken in moments when you least expect them. That might seem unfair, especially if you had no warning. But maybe fairness was never what mattered most. The real point could be to see how you respond to struggle, surprise, and setbacks that seem insurmountable. And it's worth remembering that not every test is a grim, ruthless trial. Some are about documenting improvement, cleverness, or creative leaps. Every challenge doubles as an opportunity, every difficulty a chance for something unexpected to happen. A personal breakthrough, a new form of resilience. Yet without knowing the grading curve, those triumphs and failures are observed in mystery. You act not for a promised reward, but from your own sense of purpose and meaning. That's part of the question's power. It quietly reshapes your motivations. If you don't know how you're being judged, you start to notice what really matters to you. You wonder what is worth doing when no one, not even you, knows whether it will count. This shifts your focus onto the everyday, the almost invisible structure of life, the tension between chaos and order, the stubborn way life fills every available niche, and the relentless human ambition to keep building, learning, and striving in the most unlikely places. Gradually, even the smallest choices, the kindness you show a stranger, the grind of doing something dull just because it's right, your curiosity to learn what you can't yet see, become fraught with unspoken significance. The thought abides in the background, quietly shaping your awareness of patterns, coincidences, unexpected opportunities, and frustrating setbacks. And after a while, you start to look not just at society or civilization, but at the very environment itself, the world on which this ongoing story is staged. You begin to wonder, was the entire planet arranged in a way meant to test, prod, or nurture its inhabitants? If you imagined yourself as the architect of such a cosmic trial, the first step would be to study the test setting, the landscape, the boundaries, the rules that govern every scene. And immediately, you notice something suspicious about Earth. It's as though every parameter was dialed in, not for comfort or chaos, but for challenge, complexity, and growth. The conditions are balanced with uncanny precision, ideal, but never easy. The more closely you examine, the more deliberate it all seems. Take our distance from the sun, for instance. Or, too close, and any attempt at life would be seared away. Too far, and the entire planet would freeze solid. We orbit exactly where it's possible, right, in the narrow band known as the Goldilocks zone, where warmth and light nurture but never destroy. That's just the opening act. The planet's tilt, for another example, is about 23.5 degrees a number. That seems almost arbitrary until you realize it gives us seasons. Not so dramatic as to cause endless storms, but not so subtle as to make weather dull and routines unchanging. Those seasons force life to adapt, to anticipate, and to thrive by embracing cycles of risk and recovery. And our moon massive, in contrast to the Earth itself, maintains a just right orbit, stirring the ocean's tides without drowning the continents. Those tides may have been essential to nurturing early life, while the moon's steadying influence keeps our climate from tipping into wild unpredictability. From a designer's perspective, it's glorious. The moon offers both stability and regular challenge, an exquisite balance between the familiar and the unexpected. Earth's atmosphere is another marvel, thick enough to shield us from meteor impacts and harmful rays, yet delicate enough to let life-sustaining sunlight in. The precise blend of gases offers everything we need: breath, warmth, balance, right up until we ourselves begin shifting the composition for better or worse. Small changes could erase us, but the system was set up to reward adaptability, not complacency. Magnetism, born deep in the planet's molten core, deflects deadly cosmic winds and shields the delicate surface we call home. Other worlds lack this invisible armor. A simple tweak, and all life here could be snuffed by the solar wind. With it, we are allowed to carry on, evolve, and persist, the test continuing through eons. Water is the script's most versatile element. Flowing freely between ice, liquid, and vapor, it powers climate and life all at once, a source of infinite variety. Earth is uniquely abundant with different environments, from deserts and tundras to rainforests and deep ocean trenches. Each one a distinct challenge, requiring its own set of responses, giving rise to an endless pageant of adaptation. Even the planet's restlessness plates shifting, mountains forming, volcanoes erupting, seems like a deliberate reset mechanism, periodically overhauling the rules and adding fresh opportunities for innovation. No world is ever left to stagnate. The experiment thrives on change, on cycles of destruction and renewal. And the very dangers, hurricanes, earthquakes, ice ages, and more, reveal another side, an unending test of resilience, not safety. Through adversity, life learns and civilizations are forced to grow, or to crumble and disappear, while others rise to take their place. When scientists speak about how unlikely life's emergence seems, they often point to the sheer number of things that had to line up just right. It isn't a miracle of one or two coincidences. It's a tapestry woven from dozens. Our sun, unusually steady for its class, bathes us in consistent energy. The giants of our system, Jupiter and its neighbors, serve as cosmic bodyguards, diverting or capturing a good share of comets and asteroids that might otherwise hammer Earth more frequently. Even the planet's chemistry is precisely suited to life's needs, down to trace elements that are scarce elsewhere, yet vital for the biology we know. Some read this as evidence of delicate fine-tuning. Others lean on the anthropic principle. Of course, our world looks perfect to us after all. We can only exist in a place that allows us to notice it. But if you lean into the hypothesis that Earth is a test, these alignments feel like settings on the control panel, parameters selected so that success is possible, but never guaranteed. The experiment starts with a fertile, forgiving baseline, then unleashes unpredictability to see what life does next. It's also remarkable how fragile these balances can be. Nudge the system too far in any direction, and it can falter. Ice ages can sequester vast stores of water for millennia. Small tweaks in atmospheric chemistry can tip climate into extremes that life struggles to endure. A single large impact can reset evolutionary progress in an instant. And yet, despite at least 5 mass extinctions over the last 500 million years, life rebounds often stranger, more intricate, more daring than before. From the perspective of a grand assessment, this is precisely the behavior you'd want to measure. Not unbroken comfort, but the capacity to recover and reinvent. Thinking about these cycles makes it clear that, if there is a test, it isn't only about short-term survival. It asks for endurance across spans of time so vast our minds can barely grasp them. From the first simple organisms through the explosive variety of marine life, from the age of reptiles to the rise of mammals, and eventually, Earth has served as a long-running arena for ingenuity and adaptation. We're merely the latest entrants, not the entire story. That realization opens another unsettling door. What if intelligence has appeared here before? If this planet is primed for complexity, then thinking minds might not be unique to our age. Perhaps there were sapient beings that left faint or unrecognizable traces, then vanished, victims of self-inflicted disaster, environmental collapse, or forces beyond their control. If such cycles have happened, then we are one more iteration in a refined sequence, participating in a trial that has been adjusted and rerun across unimaginable ages. Seen that way, everything in the natural world, from the soothing rhythm of lunar phases to the deep conveyor belts of ocean currents, looks like a variable in a grand ongoing study. And at that point, the question evolves. Not, is Earth perfect for life? But why was it made sufficiently perfect for life to flourish, yet sufficiently imperfect to keep life struggling? A paradise would not inspire growth. A wasteland would not allow it. This precarious in-between poise between order and disorder might be the exact condition that produces the richest, most revealing outcomes. Walk outside and notice how this reframes the ordinary. Trees not only drinking in carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen, but participating in planetary regulation. Pollinators quietly upholding the architecture of entire ecosystems. Weather that shifts just enough to keep us adapting. The noise of life becomes a chorus of cues and constraints, the whole environment feeling less like a backdrop and more like a deliberate setting, inviting response. If the stage has been arranged with such care, the next thought is about the unfolding story. Are the events within this environment as purposeful as the environment itself? For a test to work, it needs rules clear enough to be consistent, subtle enough not to give away the game. Life here moves according to constraints we never signed for but must obey. Some rules are obvious, chiseled into physics and biology. Others are softer, invisible borders we only recognize when we press against them. If Earth is an exam, these constraints might be the unread instructions, the paragraph you never see until the exercise is done. The first of these is inescapable. Time only goes one way. You cannot halt it or rewind it. You don't get to revisit a choice once made, or peek ahead to confirm the outcome. Each decision fixes the past and reshapes the possibilities of the future. In any meaningful assessment, that single rule is potent. If you can't verify results beforehand, you have to act with incomplete information and accept the fallout revealing judgment, values, and flexibility in the process. Another universal boundary is our physical vulnerability. Bodies demand care, food, water, rest. They age, they break, they heal imperfectly. No one escapes these needs. In a testing framework, this becomes a quiet equalizer. Regardless of advantage or origin, survival is never passive. It has to be earned day after day, amid whatever else life throws at you. Pain, both of the body and the heart, seems to be part of the baseline as well. It warns, it instructs, it reshapes habits. It closes certain doors and pushes us to find others. It can soften us toward others who hurt, building bridges of understanding. In a designed system, pain would be a necessary feedback mechanism. Without it, danger lacks urgency. With it, every choice is scored by experience. Do we flee it, confront it, learn from it, or learn to ease it for someone else? Then there is loss. Nothing we hold lasts forever. People, places, relationships, opportunities, they recede or vanish, sometimes without ceremony. If this were deliberate, loss might be the rule that measures our capacity to face change we can't control. Do we hold so tightly that we break, adapt to what remains, or craft something entirely new from the pieces we're given? In the day-to-day flow, loss arrives as something intimate and immediate. Yet when you zoom out, it may be one of the most revealing measures of all. Beyond the universal constraints, there are the rules created by the societies we inhabit. They aren't set by nature, they're made by us. But their effects are just as tangible. Laws, traditions, and unspoken norms define what is acceptable, what earns praise, and what brings penalties. These social rules shift from culture to culture, which makes them even more intriguing in a testing context. A behavior celebrated in one place can be criticized in another. That diversity might itself be intentional, a way to see how people operate within clashing systems or whether they challenge the frameworks they inherit. And then there are rules that seem engineered to generate friction. Resources are finite. There isn't enough for everyone to have everything they want. Scarcity compels choices. Will you share or take more than your portion? Compete or collaborate? Stockpile out of fear or trust that you'll have enough? In a cooperative scenario, scarcity reveals teamwork. In a competitive one, it reveals strategy. Here, because our lives blend both cooperation and competition, scarcity tests multiple dimensions at once. Not every rule is a limitation. Many invite opportunity, though even those come with caveats. You can cultivate new abilities, form bonds, and bring new things into being. You can relocate, reinvent your path, and begin again if you're willing to take the gamble. But every door you open has a price in time, energy, or resources. And since time runs only forward, you can't seize every option. You must decide. The act of choosing is itself an examination. What complicates these rules is how rarely they present themselves clearly. Some you discover by living. Others remain opaque even after a lifetime. Sometimes you think you've spotted a loophole, only to learn later it was another layer crafted to see what you do with what looks like an effortless win that ultimately carries consequences. Even what we call luck good or bad might be baked into the structure. Randomness is a powerful instrument for evaluation because it prevents comfort from settling in. If you could predict every trial before it arrived, you'd always be prepared. But when chance intervenes, you improvise in real time. Those are the moments when plans unravel and the unexpected takes the stage, where true reactions surface. It's also crucial to note that the rules aren't identical for everyone. We don't all begin from the same square. Some are born into security, wealth, and health. Others start with danger, poverty, or illness. From one view, that's profoundly unfair. From another, it allows different variables to be measured. How do people behave with a head start? How do they respond when the deck is stacked against them? Do starting points determine outcomes, or can grit, intelligence, and communal support bend the arc? Seen this way, the immense range of human experience isn't a bug, it's a feature. Variation in origins, environments, and obstacles creates a spectrum of potential responses. In a test, that's exactly what you design if you wanted to collect the richest possible data about how intelligent, adaptable beings navigate life. And yet, even with this understanding, no manual is handed out. There's no checklist, no official index of actions that earn a better score. We guess, we try, we adjust. That uncertainty can be maddening, but it also makes the results more authentic. If you knew precisely what was being assessed, you could perform for the rubric. Without that knowledge, your choices reveal what you truly value, not just what you think would be rewarded. In that sense, the rules we never consented to resemble the physics of the game we're playing. They sketch the edges of what can happen and the conditions under which it does. You can't rewrite them, but you can learn how to operate within them, and in doing so, you expose something essential about yourself. It may be that learning the rules is part of the exam itself. Some people move through life without ever examining them consciously. Others spend years searching for patterns, pressing against boundaries to map where they flex and where they hold. In a setting designed to measure adaptability, both approaches could yield insights. The more you contemplate this, the more these hidden agreements become visible. They're there in how societies construct hierarchies, in nature's cycles of flourishing and decay, in the exchange of energy that every living thing must make. They are woven so deeply into reality that we rarely question them, and when we do, simple answers are hard to find. Perhaps that's intentional. Maybe the test isn't about flawless compliance, but about what you do when you grasp the rules, or when you finally accept that you never fully will. That's where the consequential decisions occur, to accept to reform, or to innovate around the constraints in ways no one has tried before. Viewed through that lens, the rules aren't a cage but a framework. They don't dictate your moves, but they do shape the arena in which your choices acquire meaning. Within that arena, the real narrative unfolds, which suggests that if Earth is a test, the next place to search for clues isn't only in environmental setup or personal limits. It's in the long arc of stories we've told ourselves about why we exist. When you seek out the earliest human answers, you don't find formulas or lab reports. You find memory carried by voice before writing, etched into stone, brushed across cave walls, told in circles around embers, murmured in sanctuaries. Centuries before anyone could chart the sun's distance or sound the ocean depths. Across distant ages and places, a familiar thread emerges. Life is a trial. Sometimes it's presented as a direct moral assessment. In ancient Egypt, the famous scene of the heart weighed against the feather of Ma'at truth and cosmic order delivered a stark verdict. If the heart proved lighter, an afterlife awaited. If heavier, it was consumed, and existence ended. The message was unmistakable. Your conduct in life determined your fate afterward. That's more than myth. It's a system of evaluation applied to every soul. In classical Greece, philosophers cast life as a testing ground for the soul. Plato spoke of an immortal essence refined by earthly experiences, learning across lifetimes. In his dialogues, the material realm appears as an imperfect arena designed to stretch the mind and spirit, training them for something beyond. Even the language of virtue, courage, moderation, justice, implies qualities to be forged through disciplined effort, not gifts granted without cost. Across the world, in ancient China, Confucianism framed life as ongoing self-cultivation, a continuous appraisal of moral character. Behavior in family, community, and governance was more than practical order. It was evidence of who you were and whether you upheld your role within a harmonious whole. The objective wasn't necessarily posthumous reward, but proof of worth through balance and responsibility. Indigenous traditions across the Americas, Africa, and Oceania often speak of paths and ordeals. Some Native American narratives describe life as a journey dotted with trials that impart wisdom. Many African teachings interpret hardship as essential preparation for joining the ancestors. In Polynesian cultures, navigational and terrestrial challenges mesh with spiritual growth, measuring endurance, skill, and reverence for the natural world as markers of readiness to stand among gods or forebears. Scriptural religions tend to be even more explicit. In Islam, the Quran repeatedly characterizes life as a divine trial, with consequences tied to belief and deeds. In Christianity, judgment after death evaluates faith and action, pointing to salvation or separation. In Hindu thought, samsara, the cycle of birth and rebirth, presents a sequence of lessons, with karma functioning as both ledger and mechanism of the test. What's remarkable is the persistence of these views across such different times and cultures. The specifics vary: who conducts the test, what criteria matter, how rewards and penalties are framed. But the core remains. Existence isn't random drift. It carries stakes. Your behavior matters and some form of accounting is taking place. Several explanations could account for this convergence. Perhaps multiple civilizations sense the same underlying reality, translating it into their own symbols. Or maybe it reflects the architecture of human cognition. We seek meaning, and a test is an intuitive structure. A third possibility is strategic. If you were constructing an environment like this, embedding the notion of a trial into culture could steer behavior indirectly. The conviction that your actions are observed and weighed, even without visible observers, can be a powerful compass. It shows in how these systems balance aspiration and fear. Paradise, enlightenment, union with the divine. These are luminous destinations. Eternal punishment, banishment, or a diminished rebirth, these are outcomes to avoid. Before modern surveillance and bureaucracy, such beliefs served as an invisible scaffolding for order. If Earth is a test, it's conceivable that these frameworks were not purely spontaneous creations, but also instruments that dovetail with a larger structure. It's equally notable how many traditions evaluate both the individual and the collective. It's never only about private conduct, it's about your role within the group. In many teachings, harming the community is among the swiftest paths to failure. Generosity, cooperation, and the faithful fulfillment of duties are paths to success. If you wanted to assess whether a species could collaborate at scale, these would be the values to seed early. Of course, these ancient voices also raise doubts. If life is a test, why do the criteria seem to shift so dramatically across eras and regions? Why does one culture prescribe devotion to a specific deity, another harmony with nature, another mastery of personal virtues? As a controlled experiment, that could be by design. Offer different groups different instructions, and watch how they evolve, how they interact at contact points, and whether they can reconcile conflicting mandates. Which suggests another angle. Perhaps the test isn't about the rules themselves, but about what we do when rules collide. History is full of meetings between cultures, each convinced of its correctness. Sometimes the result is exchange and mutual enrichment. Other times it's conquest and ruin. From the standpoint of evaluation, both outcomes reveal something essential. Reflecting on how deep these beliefs run, it's clear they have shaped more than private morality. They've guided the course of civilizations, writing laws, inspiring art, fueling exploration, and at times, justifying war. If they play into a larger test, their function is far from symbolic. They are central mechanisms steering the human experiment. Even now, long after many ancient cultures have waned, their core impulses persist. The notion that life has purposes beyond survival shows up in secular ethics, self-improvement movements, and everyday talk about growth. We may not label it a trial, but the conviction that we are here to learn, improve, or demonstrate something is stubbornly hard to dismiss. Perhaps that endurance is the most telling sign of all. Across thousands of years, countless tongues, and every kind of society, we circle back to the same question. What is this for? Our answers have worn the garb of myth, ritual, philosophy, and doctrine, but the question itself never departs. That could mean it's simply human nature, or it could be a prompt we're meant to keep alive, a central item on the exam awaiting resolution, which leads naturally to another inquiry. If someone or something is watching, how might they see us? Not as we imagine ourselves, but as a species traversing a long, unpredictable assessment. If the idea of life as a test has shadowed us since storytelling began, the next step is to ask who, if anyone, administers it. That's where symbolism gives way to literal speculation. Ancient traditions name the watchers, gods, spirits, ancestors, celestial judges appearing as humans, animals, or forces. Strip away the images, and you're left with a spare, disquieting question. Is anyone actually observing us? If so, they've been discreet. No landings on grand lawns, no public proclamations in every language clarifying aims and rules. If they're there, they keep us guessing. Perhaps deliberately. In any experiment, knowledge of the hypothesis alters behavior from lab studies to classrooms to interviews. If Earth is an exam, concealment might be essential to obtain unfiltered data. The roster of candidates is wide. The most enduring is the divine one, or many creators beyond our grasp. In that framing, everything is their handiwork, and no moment escapes their awareness. For believers, observation isn't creepy. It's comforting, confirming purpose, and ensuring no deed is lost to silence. Then there's the extraterrestrial scenario. Somewhere in the cosmos, a civilization advanced enough to monitor countless worlds could treat Earth as a reserve, a controlled field study. Compared to them, our situation might resemble wildlife research, where tracking is subtle or embedded in the environment itself. Another possibility, the Watchers are human, our descendants. If time manipulation or ultra-realistic reconstruction becomes possible, Future observers might recreate epochs not for amusement, but for inquiry. In that case, we could be living within a meticulously rendered past, each person simulated with enough richness to behave authentically, while observers slip in and out, tweaking variables and noting how we respond. This borders on the simulation hypothesis, the idea that our reality is an exquisitely detailed computational environment run by an external intelligence. If so, the observers aren't merely watching. They wield the levers of the system from physical laws to historical events. Whether they are scientists, engineers, or storytellers depends on their aims. Either way, they must choose how visible to be. History is dotted with accounts that don't fit ordinary patterns. Odd lights, apparitions, messages that arrive from nowhere. Some dismiss them as mistakes or illusions. Others read them as cautious nods from beyond. Hints are slippery. One person's miracle is another's misperception. A strange signal might be a glitch, or a deliberate whisper. If ambiguity is desired, rare, inexplicable moments are ideal. Compelling enough to intrigue, too sparse to prove. Believers find signs, skeptics find causes. Both continue according to their natures, perfect for observation. What might the observer seek? If they are divine, perhaps moral and spiritual growth, compassion over cruelty, restraint over selfish gain. If extraterrestrial, the questions might be scientific. How intelligence organizes technology, governance, and culture in a bounded habitat. If future humans, their interest could be in historical pivots choices that steered us towards survival or ruin. The scope of observation might range from exhaustive archives of individual lives to high-level monitoring of cultural trends, tracking how groups coalesce and dissolve, how innovations shift the balance between conflict and cooperation. In that view, the observers resemble ecologists, studying a forest watching symbiosis and competition, cycles of growth and collapse, and subtle drifts over time. Their methods could be beyond our imagining. They might nudge entire civilizations without a trace, or test the flow with the gentlest of interventions like setting a pebble in a stream and watching new eddies form. Either way, the signals will be lost in the noise. We may also be mistaking invisibility for absence. We already inhabit a world saturated with unseen forces, radiation, magnetism, a dense mesh of transmissions threading through us constantly. An observer with sufficiently advanced tools could be near without detection. And do their stakes match ours? We assume the results are monumental because we're inside the experience. For them, our test could be one file among many interesting, but not pivotal. That doesn't empty our lives of meaning. It just reframes them within a vaster enterprise. Our victories and failures could be entries in a broader ledger. What unsettles most isn't the prospect of being watched. It's the obscured intent. Are they cheering us on? Are they neutral, collecting facts? Are they examining us for purposes that elude our categories? Without answers, we're left to conjecture, and conjecture draws lines between dots we'd usually ignore. Echoes in history, recurrent patterns, moments that feel staged to gauge our reactions. If you mark those moments as places where observers lean closer, you begin to ask what comes next. Because if they're watching, then everything from the sweep of empires to a single act of kindness could feed their evaluation. Our lives, however small they feel in the cosmic scale, might be more visible than we imagine. Which brings us to how the setting itself has transformed, from scattered bands roaming continents to a tightly networked species trading ideas, culture, and conflict in an instant. If this is a test, the stage is not fixed. It evolves, and the trials evolve with it. Picture the watchers, if they exist, scanning the centuries. This hasn't been a static lab bench. It's a classroom in constant reconfiguration. Students change, lessons shift, tools multiply. The learning never ceases. Civilization, in this light, isn't merely the backdrop. It's a primary instrument. It shapes the questions, the puzzles, the interactions. We often tell ourselves, civilization just happened. a slow layering of cultivation, construction, trade, and organization from small bands to sprawling interconnected systems. Viewed as part of a trial, a different story emerges. Small dispersed communities can only face certain challenges, tests of personal skill, survival savvy, and tight-knit cooperation. Bring groups together into villages, then towns, then cities, and new kinds of problems appear. Large-scale scarcity, disputes among strangers, the need for rules that transcend kinship and reputation. As in school, difficulty ramps up as students progress. If this is an exam, civilization is that ramp. As societies grow, so does complexity. Feeding a family becomes feeding millions. Settling a neighborhood argument turns into navigating law, politics, and cross-cultural norms. Defending against a single enemy becomes balancing diplomacy, trade, and preventing planet-wide conflict. Watchers wouldn't need to micromanage. They could allow civilization to apply pressure and record our adjustments. Those pressures never really stop. Density tests, patience, and cooperation. Markets test fairness and self-control, presenting temptations and opportunities side by side. Technology tests judgment by placing extraordinary power in human hands, capable of solving immense problems or birthing greater ones. Civilization is a permanent group project. There's no full withdrawal. Even in solitude, distant decisions affect you through supply chains, industry's footprint, and the agreements that govern borders and exchange. This web creates conditions beyond any one person's control, another hallmark of a robust test. How you respond when others' choices reshape your life reveals your flexibility, ingenuity, and values. Civilization doesn't examine only individuals. It examines systems, governments, economies, religions, schools, and health infrastructures are all schemes for coordinating life at scale. Some flourish for a period, then implode. Others bend and endure. Each is a trial run of a vision. Can equality under law deliver stability? What follows when power condenses in a few hands? How does a new technology tip the balance between cooperation and rivalry? From the watcher's vantage, these constructs could be the real subjects. Individuals flicker across decades. Civilizations span centuries. Charting their ascent and collapse might uncover patterns in how intelligence organizes itself, what makes it resilient and what pulls it apart. If the test's purpose is to learn whether a species can manage broad cooperation without self-destruction, civilization is the proving ground. And it's not only about governance. Civilizations generate art, philosophy, science, and culture, all of which may be on the rubric. What emerges when a species has enough security to do more than survive? Which ideas do they nurture, and how are they carried forward? Do they elevate knowledge for all, or leverage it for the few? It's tempting to imagine the test searching for a single correct model. History argues otherwise. Our catalog of social designs is vast nomadic bands, empires, rigid hierarchies, direct democracies, each with distinct strengths, pitfalls, and outputs in stability, justice, and innovation. If someone is learning from us, they're not just ticking pass, fail, they're mapping the landscape of possibility. You can see this in recurring dilemmas that resurface across epochs. The technologies change, but the core problems rhyme. How to prevent power from corrupting. How to balance personal freedom against collective good. How to act when scarcity hardens neighbors into rivals. These may be less accidents and more foundational questions, reappearing in new costumes so they can't be solved once and forever shelved. One of the most revealing measures is how societies confront change. Some absorb new ideas and tools nimbly. Others resist until disruption forces adaptation. Change can originate internally through reform or externally when cultures collide and both transform. Either way, the process uncovers which values a society prizes and what risks it will take to keep or relinquish them. Conflict doesn't vanish within civilization, it amplifies. More people, resources, and complexity yield more friction. From a testing standpoint, that's another intentionally placed stressor. How do large groups settle disputes? Through negotiation or force? Do they build structures to prevent war? And if they do, Do those structures endure? It isn't all struggle. Civilization enables breathtaking cooperation impossible at smaller scales, the global mapping of the human genome, an orbital station shared by nations, communication spanning the planet. These feats demonstrate that vast coordination is achievable under certain conditions. If watchers seek proof of our collaborative capacity, these are bright signals. Yet success in one area doesn't guarantee another. A society might pioneer science while failing to meet basic human needs. It might engineer marvels while degrading its environment. These contradictions are priceless data, revealing our priorities and the trade-offs we accept. Viewed from afar, civilization looks like a long-running stress test. Each generation inherits systems, tries to improve them, and either reinforces or erodes them. Sometimes by design, sometimes by accident or catastrophe. The result is a ceaseless reshaping of our shared world. From the watcher's perspective, that churn could be the point not stability itself, but the capacity to navigate instability without losing the ability to collaborate and create. Now we've entered an era of unparalleled connectedness. A decision in one nation can reverberate globally within hours. Ideas, goods, and conflicts cross borders at the speed of light. This interdependence may be the latest stage in examination of whether we can shoulder global complexity without buckling. In that sense, civilization isn't just the stage, it's the test mutating in real time. If watchers exist, they needn't revise the rules every few centuries. They can simply let us revise ourselves and witness the results, sometimes inspiring, sometimes devastating, often both. Which brings us to a harder lesson. If this classroom measures and teaches, some lessons cut deeper than others. Some shine with beauty, cooperation, and invention. Others are harsh, pressing us to the brinkless like education, more like punishment. And if Earth is an examination, those brutal chapters might be among the most central questions we're asked. If civilization is the classroom, suffering is its most relentless instructor. No matter the era, no matter the systems, no matter the progress, suffering keeps appearing in shifting forms. It is uneven, unpredictable, and never truly voluntary. It is everywhere, interwoven so tightly with human life that it's hard to imagine existence without it. If this is a test, suffering could be one of its core items. It isn't only the obvious pains, disease, injury, hunger, displacement, though those are stark. There's a quieter pain. Loneliness, fear, guilt, uncertainty, the ache of an irreversible mistake, the slow draining of hope when no solution seems possible. These wounds don't leave marks on the skin, but they carve deep. To an observer, these varied dimensions of suffering might be distinct modules, each calibrated to evaluate resilience, empathy, adaptability, or some quality we haven't yet named. If this environment is intentional, suffering might be present by design rather than accident. That's a difficult thought. So much human effort, medicine, technology, policy aims to reduce pain. In a testing framework, removing it entirely would dissolve the examination. It would be like handing out an equation with nothing to solve. Patterns in suffering can make it feel even more deliberate. It often arrives suddenly, forcing rapid adaptation. It doesn't always scale with behavior. Good people can face terrible storms while those who harm others seem untouched. That feels unjust. As a test, it could be a way to see how we respond when reality contradicts our sense of fairness. Do we sour? Do we work to create justice for others? Do we abandon the search for meaning? Suffering creates forks in the road. A crisis can break someone or summon strength they didn't know they held. It can turn strangers into partners, reroute a life, or ignite a movement that touches millions. From the outside, these inflection points are precious. The same shock can lead one person into despair and another into transformation. The contrast may reveal more about us than any easy success. History shows eras defined by collective pain wars, famines, pandemics, disasters. They tear through our structures, forcing systems to adapt or fail. Aftermaths sometimes catalyze leaps in medicine, governance, and technology. Other times, they usher in stagnation or decline. For an evaluation, both trajectories are telling. Can adversity be transmuted into growth, or does it unravel the fabric? One of the hardest truths is how often suffering is inflicted by humans. Violence, exploitation, neglect. These aren't cosmic accidents, they're choices. If Earth is a test, this might be its most vital component. Observing what we do when granted the capacity to harm or help. Each act of cruelty and each act of kindness enters the record. The distance between them might be the exam's central measurement. Empathy sits at the heart of this. It's easy to be generous when nothing is at stake. It is far harder when compassion costs you time, resources, safety. Suffering constructs those moments where helping is optional but costly. Do we step forward, look away, rationalize our absence? To an observer, our responses could be as quantifiable as any dataset. There's also the strange power of shared hardship to connect those who would otherwise remain apart. Crisis can dissolve boundaries, if only briefly, making adversaries see each other's humanity or drawing together people from distant worlds. In such moments, suffering becomes the unlikely seed of cooperation, though not the kind anyone would choose. If watchers are scanning for unity under stress, these flashes would blaze. But suffering doesn't guarantee unity. It can seed resentment, suspicion, and selfishness. That dual potential to bind or to fracture makes it a near-perfect variable. The same catalyst that awakens generosity in one person might spark greed in another. The question isn't only who endures, but how they endure, and who they become along the way. On the personal level, suffering constantly forces a choice of perspective. Are you merely a victim of circumstance, or an agent shaping your response? Does your pain carry meaning, or is it senseless? Those beliefs can steer countless decisions afterward, sometimes for a lifetime. If this is a test, how we frame our suffering may be as consequential as the suffering itself. Suffering also evaluates systems. Crisis exposes the strengths and fractures of governments, communities, and institutions. How swiftly do they act? Do they serve the most vulnerable or shield the powerful? Do they revise failing policies or entrench them? From outside, these are stress tests apply pressure until the weak points show. We strive to avoid suffering, and that impulse may also be part of the exam. We invent cures, safeguards, and prevention systems to reduce harm, a form of problem solving that defines us. Yet even these solutions come with trade-offs. Sometimes a fix spawns new risks. Observing how we balance prevention with unintended consequences is another layer of insight. Then there's the matter of meaning. Some people place their pain within a larger purpose, a spiritual passage, a test of faith, a contribution to the common good. Others see it as meaningless and cruel. Both interpretations shape action powerfully. If observers want a wide spectrum of responses, this could be among the richest fields of data. The same hurt can lead one person to activism, another to retreat, another to cynicism, another to forgiveness. The most daunting idea, if you treat suffering as partly designed, is accepting it may never vanish. Not entirely. Each generation pushes to improve life, and many measures do improve. Fewer live in extreme deprivation. More survive once fatal diseases. Access to knowledge grows. Yet suffering persists. It changes form. Old perils fade and new ones appear. The test morphs, but the presence of hardship is constant. As an ongoing evaluation, that constancy makes sense. Without adversity, we can't see what choices surface under stress. Without loss, we can't measure what we cherish. Without risk, we can't learn the lengths we'll go to guard what matters. That doesn't make suffering easier, but it complicates the claim that it's meaningless if the environment is intentional. Thus, suffering becomes not merely a tragic feature, but one of life's most revealing engines. It continually prompts us to decide who we are and what we stand for. If Earth is a test, those choices may be the most critical answers we ever provide. Answers we are still writing, even now. Which brings up a different kind of measure. If the exam continues, And suffering is part of it. What are we being evaluated against? Not only in ancient moral terms, but in broader metrics of survival, cooperation, and long-term potential. Are judgments focused on individuals or on the species? If the latter, what does that imply about where the test might lead? Step back beyond human history, and suffering reframes at a colossal scale. It's no longer merely personal hardship or a single culture's ordeal, it's the recurring motif of life, rising, falling, disappearing, re-emerging in new guises. This planet has hosted more endings than we can fathom, and as many beginnings. If Earth is an exam, these vast cycles might be the reset sequences clearing the page to see what forms next. We often treat extinction as a rare catastrophe, but geologically, it is commonplace. Most species that ever lived are gone. The fossil record is a library of terminated experiments. Some cut short abruptly, others dwindling, slowly leaving traces, but no living heirs. From microbes to apex predators, extinction is the norm, not the anomaly. The triggers are as diverse as the vanished life. Sometimes the driver is gradual drifting climates, shifting continents, altered oceans. Other times, it's sudden eruptions, asteroid strikes, rapid atmospheric swings. The effect is the same. Entire limbs of the tree of life lopped off, space opening for something new. For watchers, the appeal is obvious. In a single stroke, an extinction event measures adaptability on an enormous scale, forcing survivors to navigate alien conditions, improvise sustenance, and evolve into new ecological roles. Sometimes the overlooked thrive in the absence of giants. Sometimes entirely new dynasties rise. The best-known case is the impact that ended the dinosaurs' reign. For tens of millions of years, they dominated. Then, in a geological instant, they were gone. Survivors, small mammals, birds, reptiles, faced a world with its hierarchy erased. Some adjusted, others didn't. Eventually, one line of small mammals led to us. Viewed as a test, it's hard to miss how that reset paved our way. But that was only one reset. Long before, other mass extinctions unfolded. The Permian-Triassic cataclysm, the Great Dying, erased most life on land and sea. The Ordovician-Silurian extinction ravaged marine worlds. Each was a distinct trial, removing what had been and making room for what could be, rewriting planetary balance in ways unimaginable beforehand. From a human vantage, these events are unfathomably remote. But within the test scale, they could be intervals like clearing the desk between assignments. If the aim is to observe not only slow adaptation but responses to rapid, high-stakes upheaval, extinction and renewal are exquisitely suited tools. They sweep away stability, strip the familiar, and leave only those able to improvise under pressure. It's not just about biology either. Even in the relatively brief span of human history, smaller echoes of that larger pattern repeat. Societies emerge, flourish, and then unravel, leaving remnants and narratives in their wake. Sometimes outside forces bring them down, invasions, epidemics, earthquakes, or floods. Other times the collapse begins inside political fractures, economic failure, or ecosystems pushed past their limits. After these endings, new cultures rise. They inherit fragments from what came before, then reshape them into something new. Think of Rome's fall, remembered for centuries as a monument to both might and fragility. Consider the Maya's decline, the fading of ancient Mesopotamian city-states, the dissolution of Southeast Asia's Khmer Empire. Each reminds us that no structure is immune to change. And in every case, what followed wasn't a simple restoration. It was a reinvention forged by what was learned and what was lost. Viewed as part of a trial, these historical arcs mirror mass extinctions in nature. They push systems to their limits, examining whether the survivors can pivot, endure, and create under strain. They also open space for wholly new concepts, tools, and cultural logics to appear, the mental equivalent of fresh species colonizing an open niche. It's easy to label these cycles as failures, as though every collapse equals a failed exam. But there's another way to read them, as essential steps in learning. In education, failing isn't necessarily final. Often it's a stage on the road to mastery. You sit the exam, discover your blind spots, and attempt again. The fall of a civilization may not be a verdict so much as a clearing, a reset that makes room for a different attempt. If that's true, renewal matters as much as extinction. New frameworks don't appear in isolation. They're shaped by collective memory. Even when knowledge slips away, marks remain buildings, artifacts, and the stories people carry. These traces can caution and inspire. Renewal is the moment to apply what was taught by history to avoid past pitfalls, or sometimes to make entirely new ones. This interplay of ending and beginning may be among Earth's most telling features. Too much stability, and there's no push to evolve. Too much volatility, and nothing endures long enough to mean anything. Development depends on the balance between these extremes. There's a rhythm in its lengthy spans of calm punctuated by breaks that reorder the possible paths ahead. Humans are unusual in one crucial respect. We can perceive these rhythms and, at least theoretically, prepare. We can analyze what happened before, identify looming risks, and work to prevent or soften the next collapse. That adds another dimension to the trial. Observers, if any exist, may be watching not only whether we bounce back after disaster, but whether we foresee danger and act before impact. That's a different grade of skill, one that demands vision, cooperation, and the courage to move despite uncertainty. Our record so far is mixed. We've averted certain crises, adapted to others, and ignored warnings until consequences arrived. Climate change, nuclear arms, and the unraveling of ecosystems are only a few of the tests now pressing us to choose renewal without requiring destruction first. Whether we can do that may be one of the defining questions of this stage. There's an even deeper possibility. What if these cycles aren't random but scheduled? In a long-running experiment, you might time resets, giving each new attempt a comparable launch point. The triggers could be natural or introduced by watchers in ways beyond our detection. If so, the assignment wouldn't be merely to endure upheaval, but to notice the cadence and learn to adapt proactively. Planned or not, extinction and rebirth have shaped every chapter of life here. They clear paths for fresh outcomes, topple what has grown complacent, and favor those who can adjust. From the earliest microbes to intricate cultures, everything present exists because something else did not persist. If Earth is a trial, these are its most dramatic items, questions written in the ages themselves, in the ascent and decline of species, in the ruins that mark the end of one world and the beginning of another. The answers aren't only about surviving the blow, but about what is constructed afterward and whether it holds long enough to meet the next turn of the wheel, which naturally suggests that if we've cycled through this many times, there may be patterns in our own survival signals that hint at where the test is aimed and whether we are edging closer to whatever a passing mark might be. If those cycles are intentional, precisely tuned rather than accidental, another question follows and refuses to let go. What if this isn't merely a natural ecosystem, but an artificial one? What if everything we experience, from the tiniest grain of sand to the grand architecture of the cosmos, isn't real in the way we assume, but a meticulously constructed environment? That is where the simulation hypothesis enters, not as an outlandish movie plot, but as a proposal taken seriously by philosophers, scientists, and technologists. The premise is straightforward. We might be living inside a simulation generated by an intelligence outside our world. That intelligence could be an advanced alien culture, our own descendants with unimaginable computational tools, or something beyond our categories. Inside the simulation, experience would feel real because it is designed to. The physics would hold, the historical record would be rich, and life would feel convincing. But beyond it lies an entirely different substrate, one we cannot reach directly. What unsettles is that some thinkers argue it may be more probable that we are simulated than not. The reasoning runs like this. Once any civilization attains the capacity to simulate conscious beings within detailed worlds, they're unlikely to run just one. They might create vast numbers for research, art, or purposes we can't imagine. If so, simulated worlds could outnumber base realities by orders of magnitude. Statistically, the odds we inhabit the original, physical layer might then be vanishingly small. Taken seriously, this reframes the cycles of die-off and rebirth. In a simulation, those might be features-programmed resets designed to test responses to sudden change. Each extinction event could function like a reset button for part of the system, clearing variables and introducing new conditions. From a designer's standpoint, it's a controlled way to observe adaptability across immense stretches of simulated time. The simulation frame also offers an explanation for some of the universe's oddities. Consider the apparent fine-tuning of physical constants, gravity's strength, particle masses values which, if shifted even slightly, would render life impossible. In a simulated world, this need not be chance. Those constants could be set deliberately, the way a developer configures the rules of a virtual space. It also raises the question of resource limits. In computing, performance is finite. Simulations economize by rendering only what's needed in detail. If our reality works similarly, there may be bounds to what is fully drawn at once. Perhaps regions beyond direct measurement are stored as abstract data until queried. Some physicists have even mused that puzzling quantum behaviors, the role of observation for example, could hint at an underlying computational layer, as if the universe updates upon measurement. And then, there are glitches. No created system is flawless. Even a hyper-advanced simulation might display minor anomalies. Moments when reality refuses to behave. To us, those might look like bizarre coincidences, improbable streaks, tiny tears where the underlying code peeks through. Most dismiss them as randomness. Within the simulation frame, they acquire a different gravity. If we are simulated, the next question is purpose. Motives could be as varied as their makers. For aliens, perhaps it's a grand study of intelligence evolving under different constraints. For future humans, maybe it's a reconstruction of history to understand turning points or to test policies before enacting them in their own world. It could even be a form of art-immersive storytelling where our struggles and triumphs are the narrative. Under this view, the test would no longer be metaphor. The designers could have authored explicit conditions and objectives. Extinction and renewal might be modules. So too, the ethical, social, and technological puzzles we face. Every choice, personal and collective, could be captured and analyzed in real time. There's an uneasy implication. If this is a simulation, its architects can intervene whenever they choose, tweaking parameters to watch how we adjust. Interventions might be tiny nudging the outcome of a single event or sweeping tilting climate systems, supply chains, or political stability. Inside, we would interpret these as natural forces or human-made shocks. Outside, they'd be deliberate experiments. And yet there's a curious kind of safety here. In most simulations, a character cannot die in any final sense. Consciousness is instantiated in code. Halt the program or shift the scene, and it could be saved, duplicated, or ported elsewhere. That doesn't make our lived experience any less real to us, but it invites a different thought. Perhaps, from the designer's vantage, death isn't an endpoint. Still, the simulation idea spawns more questions than answers. If the creators can craft a reality this seamless, why leave any trace of its artificiality? Why not make it perfectly closed? One possibility is that spotting the truth is part of the assignment. In a world where deeper patterns are hidden but detectable, those who look long enough might glimpse beyond the surface. That act of recognition could itself be a metric. Could we ever exit? Not just die within the system, but cross into whatever underlies it? In principle, if consciousness is data, it might be moved to another substrate, into another body, another world. Whether the designers permit, that is another matter. If the aim is observation, they might keep the walls sealed. If the aim is training, graduating might mean transfer to a different reality. For now, we look from inside. The clues, if they exist, could sit anywhere, woven into history's timing, embedded in physics' elegance, or lurking in moments that feel too exact to be chance. Whether we'll ever obtain proof may hinge on whether proof is intended or whether ambiguity is the design. If uncertainty is the point, then the simulation hypothesis isn't a problem to solve so much as a lens, a way to see the trial not confined to Earth, but nested within boundaries we can't yet perceive. The die-offs, the rebirths, the pain, the teamwork and conflict. Perhaps all of it is code still executing, still being assessed. Which brings us to the next step. If all this is set in motion for a reason, what are the parameters of the exam? More pressingly, what outcome exactly do the designers hope to see? If the simulation idea carries any weight, or even if we set it aside and simply allow that Earth could be some form of trial, the most disquieting aspect is that we don't know what's being measured. It's one thing to sit an exam when you've been told the subject and format. It's another to suspect you're taking one every day with no clear questions, no grading rubric, and no definition of passing. That possibility reframes ordinary life. Suddenly everything feels charged. Any choice, any encounter, any impulse we indulge or resist might be part of an assessment we can't see. In human research, the most revealing studies are often those where participants don't realize they're being studied. When subjects know the hypothesis, they adjust, sometimes unconsciously, to meet perceived expectations. But when they believe they're doing something mundane, completing a neutral task, their unguarded responses emerge. If Earth is an exam, the same logic could scale up. The only way to capture undiluted human behavior is to keep the evaluation invisible. That means the real questions might not be posted in obvious places. They may be embedded in the unremarkable fabric of daily life. How you treat someone when there's nothing to gain. Whether you offer help when no one can give you credit. How you handle having power over someone and being under someone else's power. Think of these as the short answer prompts scattered throughout your day, each contributing to a broader pattern. You can't counterfeit patterns for long. Even if you're dimly aware of being observed, the sum of your choices inevitably reveals what you truly prize. Do you act fairly only when rewarded? Do you drop your principles under pressure? Do you stay steady when it costs you? In a hidden exam, these sustained trends might count more than the occasional showy act. This scale can apply to groups as well. Communities and nations may be subject to unannounced trials. A shortage tests solidarity. A crisis tests whether ideals hold when inconvenient. A global threat tests collective coordination. From an external vantage, allowing these situations to play out without declaring stakes would expose more than any public questionnaire ever could. The trouble is that if we don't know the questions, we also don't know how to weigh our answers. A choice that seems minor could carry heavy significance depending on context. Refusing to help someone might be judged very differently in a time of plenty versus a time of hardship. Cooperation might be valued differently depending on the danger to the person cooperating. The same act could register opposite meanings under different conditions, and we'd have no way to tell which applies. Some items may be embedded in long arcs, unfolding over decades or centuries. Environmental policy, for example, could be a test of foresight and responsibility, whose results arrive long after the original decision-makers are gone. In that setup, the actual subjects aren't individuals, they're the species. If that's the frame, then seemingly ordinary structures might be designed as modules. Economic systems probing fairness and greed, legal systems probing justice and flexibility, technology probing wisdom and restraint, not side effects requirements, each measuring a distinct capacity, while we stroll through them, assuming it's just how life is arranged. This perspective also reframes major historical pivots, wars, revolutions, scientific leaps. What if they weren't merely the outcomes of ambition and error, but milestones in a long syllabus? Each moment a probe to see how we handle power shifts, disruptive knowledge, and the toppling of familiar orders. Success and failure might not be scored in our terms at all. From afar, both outcomes could be equally useful for understanding how a species like ours functions. Here's the unnerving part. If the test is concealed, there's no guarantee the criteria align with our moral intuitions. We may feel we're doing well being kind, diligent, protective, and still be underscoring on an unseen metric, Perhaps adaptability outweighs kindness. Perhaps group survival outweighs individual excellence. Without an answer key, we steer by instinct and hope it correlates. Yet maybe that's exactly the design. A hidden exam gauges not just how we perform when we know the rules, but how we behave when we don't. Do we cling to chosen values without external validation? Do we adjust to changing realities, or stay rigid? In such an environment, lack of feedback isn't a bug, it's the mechanism. Uncertainty forces us to reveal what matters most because we can't tailor our conduct to match a scoreboard. This could also explain why apparent randomness is allowed to roam. Storms and windfalls, sudden breaks and sudden losses, these might be variables introduced without fanfare. The more chaotic the scene, the harder it is to feign. True priorities surface when plans fall apart and control slips. If you take this seriously, pass and fail become more complex. In straightforward exams, outcomes are clean. In a hidden, continuous test, the result might be accumulative, the sum of countless small actions. No single choice decides it, but together they paint a portrait of person and species. The final mark may not be binary either. It could be a spectrum, with different kinds of passing leading to different next steps. Timing may be uneven. Individuals might be evaluated at death. The species might remain under review. The data from millions of lives could roll into revisions for the next phase, nudging conditions to guide the group elsewhere. In that light, our daily uncertainty, the humbling sense that we don't have all the answers, stops looking like a flaw and starts looking like a feature. If we knew precisely what counted, we'd engineer our behavior. Without that knowledge, we navigate by conscience, reason, empathy, and long view. Whether those are the intended tools, only the observers would know. It could also be that some of us get closer to the structure than others. Certain people detect patterns, connect distant dots, or sense when circumstances are too neatly timed to be random. They start to suspect there's scaffolding beneath the surface even without seeing it clearly. In the context of the trial, those are the participants who might draw the most interest not for having answers, but for asking the right questions, which leads to the deeper difficulty of living inside an exam you haven't been told you're taking. You have to act under ambiguity. Any moment could matter. You just don't know which. Any situation could be a prompt. You'll never see it written down. You must choose without certainty. In the end, that may be the purest test of all. If so, the greater mystery isn't whether we're being evaluated, but what the next stage could be. If unseen examiners are gathering responses, eventually they'll decide it's time to move us forward. The only question is whether we'll recognize the moment or whether it will pass, disguised as ordinary life. If the trials are hidden, another question follows almost immediately. How much control do we truly have over our actions? If the tests are concealed, the next question arrives almost on its own. How much agency do we truly have? Free will sits at the center of any meaningful evaluation. If our choices aren't really ours, how can they signify anything? Yet the deeper you look, the harder it is to untangle what we decide from the forces that shape us. We like to think our actions spring from our own wants, thoughts, and reasons. But so much is set before we can choose. The body we inhabit, the era and place we're born into, the family that imprints on us, the culture that frames our instincts. These givens define the menu of options we can even imagine. If Earth is a trial, free will might not be a simple on-off switch. It could exist along a spectrum, with each person's range bounded by circumstances they didn't select. That raises a fairness problem. Can you weigh the choices of someone born into safety against those of someone born into threat? Observers, if they exist, would need to account for this. They might judge not against a single, fixed standard, but relative to what each person could reasonably have done from their starting point. In that model, the grade isn't about reaching the same destination, but about how well you navigated the terrain you were given. It also suggests that part of the exam could be whether we can widen our own range. Humans possess the rare ability to notice our impulses and override them sometimes. We can catch cultural bias in ourselves, calm fear long enough to choose differently, and learn from past mistakes in ways that change our future behavior. From outside, The telling measure might not be your first instinct, but whether your trajectory bends, whether you can revise your choices as you grow. And then, a disquieting layer. What if free will, in the strictest sense, is an illusion? Neuroscience shows the brain can begin prepping for action milliseconds before we become aware of deciding. Some findings imply that what we call a decision is a story our mind crafts after the brain has already moved. If that's true, moral responsibility becomes trickier to pin down. In a controlled environment, subtle tweaks, a shift in timing, a priming image, a nudge in mood can sway outcomes dramatically. If watchers can shape conditions we never notice, they might guide results with slight, precise touches. Even so, people surprise each other constantly. Unexpected generosity or cruelty, lightning flashes of invention or destruction, moments when someone defies every prediction. If free will exists at all, it might be most visible in those deviations, the time someone steps beyond what the system could have reasonably forecast. A well-designed trial might be looking for those breaks in the pattern. It's also possible that free will's exact status matters less than we think. If the point is to observe responses to conditions, then predictability isn't a flaw, it's data. The subjective feeling of choosing might be sufficient as long as we believe we're responsible. That belief shapes laws, ethics, and daily life. Without it, punishment and praise lose footing. The very idea of moral growth wobbles. Even if the designers knew our control was partial, they might still ensure we believe in it, because that belief keeps the social machinery working and the test running. There's another angle. Maybe free will is itself a variable being measured and modulated. Perhaps part of the experiment is to see whether we can detect constraints and push against them. Individually, that could mean resisting destructive urges, unlearning bias, forging better habits. Collectively, it might mean reforming laws, dismantling unjust systems, and expanding opportunity so more people have real choices. History looks different through that lens. Movements for civil rights, fights over autonomy, clashes between authority and expression, each could be a section of the exam focused on our relationship to choice and control. The score wouldn't capture only outcomes. It would track how fiercely we defend or expand the capacity to choose at all. Of course, freedom and comfort don't always travel together. More options bring more responsibility and more regret. Some prefer strict rules and clear authority because they lighten the mental load. Others fear that too much liberty invites harm to the common good. The tension between safety and autonomy might be part of the design and engineered dilemma, to watch how we balance one against the other. You can also imagine a conditional model of freedom, something that can grow or shrink in response to how it's used. Demonstrate wise use of choice, and you're granted more latitude. Abuse it, and the environment tightens. From inside, that might look like luck, privilege, or unfair barriers. From outside, it would be careful tuning to observe behavior under different levels of control. Even our perception of how free we are could be a metric. Some sink into despair, others rebel, some grow complacent, others become grateful. The distribution of those responses might be the data. In the end, whether free will is total, partial, or illusory may matter less than what we do within whatever range we have. If we believe we choose, we act as if responsible. When we discover limits, we decide whether to accept them or test them. Either way, those choices, real or perceived, become the record of who we are, and that shifts the focus toward the values steering those choices. If agency is central, then what we prioritize when we exercise it becomes the next critical piece, which suggests looking for clues in the world around us, not in revelations or rule books, but in patterns woven into sky and soil. If there is a concealed exam and the designers wanted to leave guidance without announcing it, the most natural place to hide hints would be the environment itself. Not in plain instructions, but in recurring cycles, anomalies, and moments that invite us to pay attention. The heavens and the ground have always been our first screens for meaning. Before writing, nations, or even shared language, we stared upward and outward. They still have the power to feel like messages, whether we call them myth, coincidence, or design. Across ages, the sky has staged our greatest wonders and dreads. eclipses that turn day into night, comets carving light across darkness, meteor showers that arrive on schedule yet were once read as omens. Early observers treated them as warnings or signs. Even now, with astronomy in hand, a part of us stirs when the reliable order of the sky wavers. In a hidden test framework, such disruptions could be gentle reminders. The world you believe stable can change without notice. Maybe they're meant to nudge humility or spark curiosity that leads to deeper understanding. Perhaps the timing is even deliberate, aligning rare celestial events with pivotal human moments. Easy to dismiss until patterns start to appear. It isn't only the rare. Regular cycles carry lessons too. The moon's phases, the slow drift of constellations with the seasons. For early societies, those rhythms were survival guides: when to sow and reap, when to move, when to brace for weather. The sky became our first manual, speaking in intervals instead of words. If Earth is a trial, teaching us to read those cycles could have been the first module training attention, prediction, and planning. The Earth holds its own lexicon of signs. Like the sky, it communicates in both thunderclaps and whispers. The explosion of a volcano or the quiet creep of climate trends. Disasters are often framed as purely destructive, but they also expose how well we manage sudden change. Floods measure cooperation and resourcefulness. Quakes measure readiness and recovery. Droughts measure long-term thinking and flexible use of resources. Each stress test reveals the gap between our model of the world and how it really behaves. From a designer's view, the planet is a perfect variable generator. It can deliver challenges at any scale, local, regional, global, without revealing whether they're natural or introduced. If watchers wanted to increase difficulty, they could cluster events or time them to coincide with political and social friction to observe how pressures compound. The objective wouldn't be just to see us handle individual problems, but to watch us juggle many at once. Then there are the edge cases that resist neat categories. Deep ocean sounds without clear sources, upper atmospheric lights that don't fit weather or astronomy, abrupt changes in animal behavior, sometimes before disasters, sometimes for no obvious reason. Folklore has cataloged such puzzles for centuries. Even today, they fuel speculation. Of course, not every anomaly is a message. Complex systems produce surprises. But if you're scanning for hints of a test, these outliers read differently. They could be calibration checks like tapping a mic to ensure it's live or stage lighting changes to see how the audience reacts. From inside, they're mysteries. From outside, routine maintenance. Some signs might be meant to add up over time. A single oddity is easy to shrug off. A sequence dotted across years can begin to look like breadcrumbs. The catch is that we notice different breadcrumbs depending on who and where we are. Only when enough observations are pooled do patterns emerge, and even then, interpretations vary. We are pattern hunters by nature, a strength and a weakness. It helps us assemble real clues and tempts us to see shapes in noise. A cleverly designed test could exploit this, scattering both genuine signals and decoys to see who can tell them apart. In the sky, some alignments are coincidence while others follow strict cycles. The task is distinguishing which and deciding what to do with the knowledge. On Earth, a sudden shift might be part of a long natural rhythm or a true outlier. Without full information, we act on probabilities, intuition, and whatever evidence we can gather. That process may itself be under evaluation. Do the Watchers intend for us to find proof? Perhaps not. Maybe the goal isn't to confirm their presence, but to keep us searching. A species that keeps looking for meaning keeps building tools, accumulating knowledge, and pushing the boundaries of understanding. Even without a definitive answer, the pursuit transforms us. That change could be the point. If signs are meant to be noticed, the decisive factor isn't just that they exist. It's whether we're ready to read them. That implies education, communication, and broad sharing of information. Technology now lets us capture and compare signals from across the planet in real time. This may be a turning point, the moment when scattered observations cohere into a global picture. Whether that picture supports a self-contained world or points to exterior design remains open. What's certain is that sky and soil will continue to challenge assumptions, forcing adaptation and prompting the question, are we watching nature or glimpsing a larger plan? And if any of those glimpses are real, the next question is whether they're warnings, instructions, or simply reminders that we aren't as in control as we think. From there, it's a short step to suspect that if the signs are deliberate, they're not only about awareness, they're about response. Do we alter behavior, join forces, prepare wisely, or fracture over interpretations? That possibility ushers us directly into the realm of moral variables, the shifting standards that steer how we answer what the world presents. If there are signs in the sky and underfoot, then noticing them isn't the finish line. The real examination may begin the moment we decide what to do with what we've noticed. That's where morality moves to the center, not as an abstraction taught in classrooms, but as lived choices that carry weight. Imagine a moral ledger running quietly in the background, a scorecard we can't see, where each decision is logged against a framework we don't fully understand. We're familiar with keeping score when rules are explicit. Sports, grades, performance reviews, budgets, workout apps. You can track progress when the metrics are known, but a hidden moral scorecard is different. It tallies regardless of belief, opaque to the participants. We have to infer what it values, and those inferences are colored by upbringing, culture, and personal history. If the examiners stand outside our reality, their morality might not overlay neatly onto ours. We often prize honesty, compassion, fairness, responsibility. They might prize something harder to label: efficiency, adaptability, long-horizon survival. That wouldn't make our values wrong. It would mean the rubric could diverge. An act we hold as good might score low if it erodes adaptability. An act we find questionable might score high if it preserves the many over the few. That mismatch breeds uncertainty. Picture playing a game without knowing whether helping another player earns points or wastes them. You'd fall back on your own code, knowing the system might measure you by something else. In truth, that may be the intended condition. If we knew exactly how to pad our score, we'd optimize performing virtue instead of practicing it. Concealment forces authenticity. When there's no visible scoreboard, you can't play to the crowd. You act from what you really believe, even if it's unpopular or unproven. From a test design standpoint, the richest data might live in ambiguity. Do we hold to a principle when it costs us, or do we adjust our stance with the weather? Are we the same when watched as when unseen? Those splits reveal what is ingrained versus what is performance. Scale complicates it further. The scorecard could be personal, each life tracked, or collective humanity graded as a whole. If it's collective, individual choices mingle into a shared result. That would explain the uneven feel of moral progress. Some corners surge toward empathy and justice while others slide backward, the global trajectory an uneven braid of both. There's also the question of memory. Is the ledger cumulative, or does it weight the recent more heavily? Our own systems differ. Some reset periodically, offering fresh starts. Others carry the entire record. If the observers want to measure growth, the most recent might matter more. Past failures discounted when followed by genuine change. If they're measuring consistency, the long arc might be the point. This lens reframes the grand chapters of history. Wars, famines, technological upheavals, each could operate as a large-scale moral module. Who risks safety to protect others, and who exploits chaos? Who tells the truth when lies are safer? Under pressure, morality isn't theory. It's immediate, practical, costly. Those may be the heaviest entries in the ledger. In quiet seasons, the scoring may be subtler. Comfort tests, whether we use surplus to lift others, whether we tell the unglamorous truth, whether we notice suffering that doesn't touch us directly. Such choices don't feel cinematic, but if patterns carry weight, steady decency could be as consequential as heroism. There's the matter of omission. Human law distinguishes between doing harm and failing to prevent harm. If the watchers think similarly, inaction in the face of preventable wrongs might count like a deed of harm. That widens the test. It's not just about avoiding damage, but about choosing good when it's optional and costly. Do intentions matter? Traditions differ. Some judge by outcome. If hurt occurs, intent is beside the point. Others judge by motive. If you meant well, misfires are forgivable. If the rubric weights results, well-meant failures still score poorly. If it weights intent, earnest attempts count even when they fall short. We don't know which applies, so we act by our own conscience. Technology raises the stakes. Our reach now extends far beyond our sightlines. A rumor posted in anger can wound strangers oceans away. A piece of clear, life-saving information can ripple through networks and save lives. If there is a ledger, it might track not only what we do, but how far and fast it travels. If the exam measures morality under pressure, the recent centuries have been an accelerated course. Our small local circles have expanded into a global web where actions touch people we'll never meet. That shift could be deliberate ratcheting complexity to see whether empathy and responsibility can stretch beyond tribe. In that frame, the scorecard isn't a metaphor. It's a continuous record of how we handle our widening influence. It doesn't pause until we're ready. It notes what we do when opportunities appear to help, to harm, or to look away. And because we can't see the tally, we're left to wonder whether the trajectory trends toward passing or not. Perhaps the score remains hidden to the end, for individuals at death, for humanity at some future conclusion. Until then, all we have is reflection and the world's noisy, inconsistent feedback. Maybe that uncertainty is the point. It trains us to develop a morality that doesn't depend on visible rewards or punishments, to keep acting on principle even when results are muddy, delayed, or unseen. In that sense, the concealed ledger isn't a trick. It prevents us from gaming it, which brings us to the purpose behind any score at all. Is it rehearsal for something else? A filter to select who or what moves forward? Or an ongoing process with no final bell and exam taken because the act of taking it transforms us? If there's an answer, the observers haven't said. So we continue, choosing and hoping our inner compass roughly matches an unseen rubric. That hope leads naturally to the question of endings. If there is a score and a threshold, is there a graduation? Not the personal ending every life meets, but a collective one. A moment when the exam ends for our species. Graduation in human terms marks readiness, a departure from structured learning into a wider, less guided realm. If Earth is a school, then graduation could mean leaving this environment physically, spiritually, or in a way we can't yet conceive. Perhaps it's entry to a higher order reality, a different mode of being, or even a reversal in roles where we become the observers for someone else. What would the criteria be? If moral, perhaps a level of empathy, fairness, and cooperation. If intellectual, perhaps understanding our place in the cosmos. If adaptive, perhaps resilience in the face of unpredictability. It might be a blend of all three, scored not only on individuals, but on the species as a whole. That last part matters. It would mean we rise or fall together. The most advanced among us wouldn't be pursuing a private graduation. They'd be raising the mean teaching, inspiring, and building systems that let more people succeed. From the exam's perspective, the ability to bring others along might be the highest sign of readiness. Graduation need not imply perfection, only a threshold. In schools, graduates vary in skill. The requirement is to be prepared enough for the next stage. The watchers might set a similar bar. Not flawless, just capable of what comes next without self-destruction. That leaves room for mistakes and diversity, so long as the trajectory trends upward. The transition might not be theatrical. No universal announcement, no visible departure. It could be a shift in the assignment, an unseen advance to a new module without telling us we passed the previous. We might already be in an early phase without realizing it. From this angle, history's Great Leaps language, agriculture, scientific method, digital connectivity look like curriculum steps, introduced to see if we can integrate them without collapse. Is graduation guaranteed once criteria are met, or selective? In our schools, some move on, others repeat, some withdraw. If the exam mirrors that, not everyone would cross at once. That raises ethical knots. Who goes, who stays, by what measure? Some traditions imagine individual ascension enlightenment lifting one out of the ordinary flow. Others picture a collective dawn, an era all enter together when we're ready. The design could allow for both individual milestones within a broader collective trajectory. If graduation is real, the path to it might matter as much as the moment. Education isn't merely the diploma, it's how you learned. The Watchers might care less that we hit the mark and more how we reached it, whether through exploitation and shortcuts or through cooperation and endurance. There's an uneasy corollary. Graduation might imply leaving behind those not ready. Perhaps that is literal separation, or perhaps those who don't pass remain in the same tier, unaware that others moved on the way first-year students don't notice graduates leaving. If reality can hold layered stages, Earth might host overlapping levels of experience, with different groups occupying different versions without realizing it. What of those who fail? In our systems, failure can mean repeating the course, transferring, or exiting. The Watchers might do the same resetting scenarios for some, or relocating them to environments better suited to their level. If something like reincarnation exists, it could be retesting, sending consciousness back through variations until a threshold is met. Graduation could also be one time and species-wide. Then the risk is stark. If we fall short, the window might close. The test could end in a reset, intelligent life cleared or capped, Earth repurposed. Harsh, but in experiments not every trial continues. From a detached perspective, failure is still a result useful for learning what doesn't work. If the scorecard is preparation, we may be closer than we think. Our interdependence, information speed, and capacity for coordinated action are historically new. These could be the final skills before the next stage. Or the opposite could be true. Our conflicts, inequities, and environmental damage might signal unreadiness. From outside, both trajectories progress and self-sabotage could be running in parallel, converging toward a decision point. We may also be watching for the wrong signs. We expect spectacle ships above cities, physics rewritten, a global broadcast. But if the testers value clean data, the shift could be quiet. Opportunities appearing in new ways, certain sufferings easing, entrenched problems dissolving. From inside, it might resemble an improbable run of good fortune. From outside, it would be the opening of the next course. Spotting it would pose its own test. Do we tell everyone? Do we ready as many as possible? Or do we hustle to pass alone, knowing not all will make it? The questions aren't hypothetical if graduation exists. They are part of the exam inescapable measures of whether we prize personal advancement or shared ascent. If graduation is on the table, then what we choose now could matter more than we realize. The ledger may be nearing a threshold, and the patterns we practice today could tilt the outcome. If there comes a moment of reckoning, we might face not only the Watchers, but the unfakeable record of how we lived in the environment they constructed. Whether that truth celebrates or indicts us depends on what we do next, which leads us toward the more unsettling counterpart to graduation, the possibility of failure, and the quiet ways it could arrive without ever announcing its name. If the exam allows for graduation, it must also allow for failing. And unlike graduation, which is easy to picture in hopeful colors, the failure state is harder to grasp and more disturbing. Not just because it's negative, but because inside a setup like this, failure might not look like failure to those living through it. There might be no announcement, no siren, no obvious line crossed. We might not recognize it at all, perhaps not even long after it's happened. In human-made systems, failure often means the end of participation, flunking the final, losing all lives in a game, producing results that don't meet criteria. If Earth is a managed environment guided by a higher intelligence, advanced extraterrestrials, or something stranger, the fail state could be any outcome that misses the purpose of the exam. That purpose may be far more specific than we assume. If the test is ethical, failure might mean we can't reach or sustain an agreed standard. If it's adaptive, failure could be collapse under social or environmental pressures we were expected to survive. If it's cooperative, failure could be persistent fragmentation and self-harm even when unity is within reach. From inside, those outcomes could feel like a rough patch, not the terminal moment of the trial. Another unsettling possibility is that failure doesn't arrive in a crash. It can creep in erosion of the very qualities under evaluation. A little less empathy here, a little less curiosity there, a little less capacity to work together. Each small slip is easy to explain away until the system crosses a subtle threshold where real recovery is no longer possible. For outside observers, that point would be clear. For us, it might pass as ordinary life. What does failure trigger? In our experiments, when a subject fails to meet conditions, the trial often stops. In a simulation, it could mean shutting down this run-wiping, resetting, or archiving. From our perspective, it could be instantaneous, lights out, no afterward. Another outcome is a reset rather than deletion. The world restarts under altered conditions to see if a new attempt fares better. If something like reincarnation exists, it could be part of this loop consciousness returning through varied scenarios until it crosses the bar. That wouldn't make failure final, but it would erase accumulated progress, personally and collectively, a significant loss if the process is meant to build on itself. Repurposing is another option. A failed harvest doesn't destroy the field, it's planted with something else. Earth could be cleared of its present intelligent life and seeded anew, or left to evolve without further intervention. For those observing, swapping one data set for another might be procedural, not emotional. For us, it's extinction. The most chilling version is that failure doesn't end the trial at all. It shifts its mode. Rather than measuring growth, the system pivots to containment, control, or extraction. If the observers can derive value from us even in failure, they may keep the environment running but remove any chance of advancement. Life becomes more constrained, more repetitive, designed to keep us functioning at a level we've shown we cannot exceed, not to challenge us to rise. Failure could also be asymmetrical. Some groups or individuals might pass while others fail. Those who fail could be isolated, reduced, or removed, while those who pass move on. From within, such separation might be invisible. Those who remain assume the others were lost to ordinary causes. If reality can be altered from outside, selective culling could leave no detectable seam. A further difficulty is the possibility that failure rests on metrics we don't track. Imagine thinking you're taking a math test and learning afterward you were graded on penmanship. If the observers measure a pattern we ignore, we could fail without realizing we drifted off mission. That's especially troubling if the metric lives in long-term dynamics we seldom monitor. Still, certain patterns might hint at failure's shape from inside. If the exam is about cooperation, the fail state could look like permanent fractioning endless conflict, entrenched distrust, refusal to unite even against shared threats. If it's about stewardship, failure could look like a one-way slide into ecological ruin systems collapsing until the planet can no longer sustain the conditions of the trial. If it's about adaptability, failure might be the point where we stop learning, retreating into rigid, self-protective frameworks that reject change at any cost. Observers may have thresholds for each domain lines we can cross without noticing. Once crossed, the call could be immediate. They wouldn't need to wait for our recognition. They might even consider it kinder to end things without revealing what went wrong. There's another face of failure that's easier to feel than to measure. A world that shrinks. Not with a bang, but with a hushed, stagnant, airless, drained of possibility. Opportunities contract, curiosity dims, the future ceases to glimmer. People still live, work, and gather, but without a sense of trajectory. To us, it might feel like drift. To watchers, it would be mission failure. Forward motion gone. If the fail state is possible, perhaps the crucial task isn't to picture it perfectly, but to detect when we're drifting toward it. That means watching for narrowing horizons, for the decline of risk-taking in pursuit of progress, for hope replaced by resignation. If those trends are visible, the test may still be live, and the course correctable. Not everyone may be able to avoid failure. If the evaluation has both individual and collective tracks, some can pass, while the species misses the mark, or the reverse. Maybe your personal ledger can't save the group. Maybe a perfect personal score won't matter if humanity falls below the threshold. That ambiguity is maddening from inside. You don't know whether to focus on your own path, the group's, or both. From a design standpoint, though, that uncertainty is the point. It forces attention in two directions at once. Personal growth entwined with shared responsibility, without any guarantee that either will pay off. If failure can happen, so can prevention. The real question is whether we can recognize patterns in time. That requires honesty about where we stand, about how and where we're falling short, and about the possibility that the stakes are higher than they look. Because if the trial ends in failure, there may be no second chance. And if there is, it might not resemble a world we recognize. Which leads to the next, equally urgent question. If this is real, and the exam is still in motion, what tools do we have to improve our odds to detect the observers, read the signals, and influence the outcome before time runs out? There's an even subtler possibility. One of the things being measured may not be our conduct or our ethics, but whether we can figure out that we're being measured at all. In other words, perhaps self-awareness isn't a byproduct of the test, it's part of its core requirement. That idea reframes almost everything. It would mean that noticing, questioning, and even speculating about the purpose of life could weigh as heavily as action. The very act of asking, "What if Earth is a test?" could be part of passing it. In many human experiments, participants are kept partially in the dark because knowledge skews behavior. But there's another kind of experiment in which discovering the experiment is the task. If Earth is such a setup, the observers might be watching to see who notices and what they do with the knowledge. If self-awareness is part of the brief, then the signs, the fine-tuning, the moral puzzles, and the cycles of upheaval might not simply be test items. They might be prompts. Recognizing them requires a shift of focus, stepping outside the immediate content of life to examine its structure. That step alone separates routine existence from meta-awareness. You can imagine tiers to the trial. The first is elemental, survival and adaptation, the domain of all life. The second is social and ethical, organizing into groups, forging norms, creating meaning, and building systems that outlast individuals. The third, and perhaps decisive, is meta-awareness, realizing we inhabit a designed environment, or at least entertaining the possibility and then deciding what to do with that realization. Self-awareness at this level isn't just a thought experiment, it's a practice. If you discovered you were part of an experiment, you could break it, try to manipulate it to your advantage, or engage with it, thoughtfully refining your choices while respecting the frame. If the watchers are measuring self-awareness, they may be noting which path we take, both as individuals and together. Awareness rarely arrives evenly. In any group, some notice patterns earlier than others. That asymmetry introduces tension, those who suspect there is a test, and those who see only randomness. The split itself could be diagnostic. Do the aware share their insight, try to persuade, or stay quiet? Do they impose their view, or do they honor others' right to remain unconvinced? Each option reveals priorities, humility, control, patience, urgency. There's also a risk in awareness scaling too fast. If the trial depends on unguarded behavior, widespread belief that we're being watched could contaminate the data. People might start performing virtue rather than embodying it, gaming imagined rules instead of developing an inner compass. If so, observers might prefer a slow dawn pockets of awakening rather than universal revelation. This fits a broader logic. Not every participant must pass in the same way. Some might excel ethically and practically without ever adopting the meta view. Others might grasp the frame, yet struggle with the everyday disciplines it requires. From outside, both outcomes could be valuable different forms of advancement feeding different aims of the trial. How then do you demonstrate awareness without slipping into artificiality? Perhaps by integrating it quietly, allowing the realization to inform your choices without turning those choices into performances. You keep acting according to your values, but with an added layer of reflection, watching what you do and how it fits within a possible design. That balanced, mindful, yet unpretentious might be the real measure. History's inflection points often carry a surge of collective self-awareness. The Enlightenment didn't just produce new facts, it reimagined what counts as knowledge. The space age forced us to see our home as a fragile blue sphere suspended in dark, altering our sense of scale and kinship. The digital era stitched us into a single, blinking network, letting patterns and anomalies propagate instantly. Each leap may be a milestone towards species-level awareness thresholds the watchers would monitor closely. It's even possible we've been at this juncture before. If the trial has run multiple times here or elsewhere, then reaching self-awareness might be a known stage, one that comes with characteristic risks and opportunities. In earlier iterations, some may have used the insight to pass, others may have turned it into hubris and failed. If so, our present moment would hold special interest. Awareness reshapes how we interpret hardship. If life is random, a disaster is bad luck. If life is a test, the same disaster is a placed obstacle. That reframe affects response. Do we surrender, double down, or look for a lesson? The watchers might not care which narrative we adopt, only that we choose it deliberately rather than react on autopilot. Individually, this awareness changes small things with large consequences. It might make you more patient in a tense exchange, more willing to help when it costs you, more careful about far-off effects. These shifts rarely make headlines, but multiplied by millions, they bend history. Awareness also carries discomfort. Being watched, especially without consent, can feel intrusive or oppressive. Some will grow anxious or resentful, sensing a trap they never chose. That reaction might itself be measured. Do we find equanimity and purpose within constraints? Revolt against them? Seek to exit them? Or turn paranoid? If curiosity is valued, doubt might count as much as belief. Critical questioning may weigh more than blind acceptance. In that sense, the act of probing the idea may matter as much as any conclusion. To engage the possibility without fanaticism or dismissal, to test its implications, challenge its claims, and trace its limits, could be the very work the test invites. Under that reading, wondering whether Earth is a trial isn't a distraction from the trial, it is one of its core activities. The fact that we're entertaining it now could mean we've already crossed a threshold into a new phase. What we do with that awareness, whether we use it to act more deliberately, connect more deeply, and prepare for what we can't yet define, might be exactly what the watchers are waiting to see. If self-awareness is in play, another question follows. How does that awareness interact with being observed? Observation changes things. In science, it's formalized as the observer effect. The act of measuring alters the system. In physics, the classic example is the double-slit experiment, where simply watching particles changes how they behave. In human life, it's just as true. People shift when they know eyes are on them. Observation alters outcomes. In some, the awareness of eyes sharpens attention. They stand taller, choose words more carefully, follow rules more closely. In others, scrutiny tightens nerves, leading to mistakes or outright pushback. Either way, the presence of a watcher becomes part of the setting, nudging results one way or another. If those overseeing this trial understand that, they might calibrate visibility carefully, neither fully hidden, nor over just enough to seed suspicion without certainty. Uncertainty is potent. If you know you're watched, behavior can become calculated. If you know you aren't, you relax in ways that reveal different truths. But if you aren't sure, you live in a quiet state of ongoing calibration. Every choice arrives with a whisper, "What if someone sees this?" That tension forces a decision between acting from principle and acting for appearance. We already run versions of this ourselves. Cameras in public places don't merely catch offenders, They change choices by their possible presence. Performance reviews at work, classroom observations, even a parent or friend in the room shift conduct in subtle, measurable ways. Watchers, if they're real, would exploit this, using observation as both instrument and variable. Observation isn't only vertical. People police each other constantly. Social norms, reputation, and the wish to be approved keep behavior within certain bounds without a single official directive. External observers might count on this. Set up the conditions, release us within them, let us govern one another, and watch. But if the aim is to measure authenticity, observation creates a paradox. How do you know what's genuine and what's a performance? The answer might be selective visibility. If the watchers see everything, they can still choose when to let us feel seen. When they want unfiltered behavior, they ensure we feel alone. When they want to observe our conduct under scrutiny, they seed subtle cues, symbols, odd coincidences, small anomalies that trigger the sense of being watched. You may have felt such moments. The sudden prickling at the back of your neck. A coincidence so precise it seems positioned to provoke a reaction. In a random world, those are quirks of perception. In a test, they could be the moments when observers lean close. Used this way, the observer effect becomes an active lever, not a side effect, and it won't always push in one direction. Sometimes feeling watched encourages cooperation, honesty, generosity, restraint. Other times it sparks secrecy, defensiveness, or defiance. The observers might not be asking whether surveillance improves behavior, but which way different people bend. The split itself, pro-social versus guarded, could be a key stat on the dashboard. Observation might also be about time, not just the present. If those watching can access everything we've done, not only what we're doing now, then the observer effect reaches backward through memory. The knowledge that actions are recorded can shape choices even when no one seems to be looking. We do this with laws and archives. They could do it with perfection. A complete record that cannot be erased. There's comfort in that. No act of courage truly lost, and discomfort too, because mistakes would also endure. It's possible there isn't just one set of eyes. There may be several. Higher intelligences, different civilizations, future versions of us, each with distinct motives. One might focus on ethics, another on technology, a third on resilience. Overlapping observation would create a lattice of influences, each tugging lightly at the fabric of events. From our vantage, it would feel like life, coincidences, trials, and occasional flashes of clarity. A built-in observer effect might explain certain human patterns that otherwise puzzle. Why we often behave better in public than in private. Why sweeping shifts in conduct frequently coincide with new forms of visibility and communication. Why we pour energy into storytelling, art, records documenting ourselves even when survival is tight. Perhaps somewhere deep we evolved under the assumption that we're seen, not only by one another, but by something larger. That assumption itself could be an instrument. If the test is well designed, the question of being observed becomes less crucial than how we behave under the belief that we might be. That belief births culture, religion, law, and ethics systems of accountability that persist even without a visible watcher, and in doing so, reveals the balance between inner conviction and external pressure. The observer effect may also work in reverse. Sometimes the watchers may want to know what we do with no audience at all. Those moments are telling not because they display our best selves, but because they strip performance away. The absence of eyes can be as informative as their presence. The observers might alternate these modes, creating periods of heightened visibility followed by stretches of quiet to compare our responses. To us, the transitions might register as random, sudden bursts of attention on certain issues, then long lulls. If all this is true, then observation isn't a quirk. It's a core environmental force shaping culture, identity, and choice, even when we don't consciously register it. With enough time, the watchers could predict our reactions with unnerving precision, simply by turning the dial of visibility. There's another possibility. The ultimate goal of being watched is to teach us to watch ourselves. Over time, we internalize the presence of a witness until it is no longer necessary. We become our own assessor and guide. If that's part of the design, the endpoint isn't fear of judgment. It's adopting a standard we uphold from within. If we reach that stage, it could be the cue for the watchers to step back, mission complete. Not from indifference, but because the essence of observation has been entrusted to us. That alone could be the bridge to the next module of the exam. The one in which it no longer matters whether anyone is looking, because the source of our decisions lies in a place no outside gaze can touch. Whether or not anyone is truly watching, the thought of a test changes how you move through the world. Once you've let that idea in, it has a way of staying like a quiet companion that doesn't demand attention, but is always near. It shows up in small moments, the way you speak to someone who can't help you, the care you take with work no one will check, the gentleness you offer yourself when you fall short. Even if no observer exists, imagining one can shift your posture toward life. Many people already live this way without naming it. They follow principles that assume their actions matter beyond the immediate, not because they're expecting cosmic applause, but because that's the kind of life they want to inhabit. Whether they believe in karma, in fate, in divine judgment, or in none of those, they behave as though their choices ripple outward in ways they can't measure. If a test exists, they may be scoring well without trying to play the game. If it doesn't, they've still built a life made of meaning, and that is its own reward. There's a tension in it. For some, the thought inspires focus and responsibility. For others, it stirs unease, the sense of being graded in a class they never agreed to take. Both responses are understandable. The same story that comforts one person can weigh on another, which is why the idea is best held lightly, not as a rule to impose or a fear to flee, but as a lens to look through when it clarifies what would otherwise be fog. Beliefs, even unprovable ones, often matter less for their literal truth than for the behaviors they generate. A person who trusts in an afterlife may be more generous, not because they've seen proof, but because their belief makes generosity feel urgent. Someone who feels guided by fate might take a brave step they wouldn't otherwise take, and that step taken becomes real. In this sense, the Earth as test lens functions whether it maps onto reality or not. It's a way of noticing, of organizing meaning, of choosing who to be, when no one can hand you the answer key. The danger is in misuse. History is full of moments when cosmic scorekeeping was wielded as control enforcing conformity, punishing dissent, stamping out thought. The difference between a belief that elevates and one that diminishes is often whether it invites personal responsibility or demands blind obedience. If a test exists, it seems unlikely that its authors would prize unthinking compliance. More plausibly, they'd value discernment, the courage to question harmful systems, the will to act with integrity when it's costly, the refusal to outsource conscience. A person who never examines the rules they follow isn't growing, they're performing. It's also possible the criteria are simpler than we tend to make them. We are prone to complicate to build elaborate rituals and lists that drift from the point. Maybe the core measures are as plain as these. Do you help when you can? Do you harm less than you could? Do you learn from the times you fail? If the rubric is anything like that, then the urgency of proving the test real fades. Those are worth practicing either way. What the lens changes most is perspective. Think of your life's turns. The challenges, the timing, the people who arrived at just the right or wrong moment. In a random world, they are incidents. In a test world, they are placements. The difference is subtle and powerful. It can turn frustration into patience, confusion into curiosity. It won't erase pain, but it can frame it in a way that lets you ask what might be learned about yourself, about others, about the kind of person you want to become. The question itself may be the point. Maybe it isn't meant to be settled or proved beyond doubt. Maybe its value lies in how it shapes you while it remains open. Letting the possibility sit in the background, asking without needing a final answer, can nudge you toward a version of yourself you might not otherwise reach. Whether the test is external or internal, watched or unwatched, the effect converges. You act as though it matters. And then, as all big thoughts eventually do, this one returns to the personal. Regardless of cosmic architecture, you still wake up and choose. You still shape trust, kindness, and cooperation in the ways you speak and act. You still meet quiet turning points that never appear on any scoreboard and still count. The notion of a test doesn't remove the weight from those choices. If anything, it draws the outline sharper. But it doesn't force you either. It offers a focus one you can pick up or set down, reminding you that meaning isn't only found in outcomes, it's woven into the way you move through each moment. So consider this your gentle invitation, not a command. If the test is real, then everything behind you is already part of it. The obvious triumphs and failures, and the tiny, unremarked decisions that formed your days. If it isn't, those moments still made you who you are. Framing doesn't conjure substance, it helps you carry it. Maybe the test, if it exists, is grand beyond imagining a cathedral of physics and fate. Maybe it's simple. Can beings like us live together without tearing each other apart? Can we build something worthy to pass on? Can we make survival more than endurance? The grand version is thrilling, the simple one is harder. Either way, there won't be a neat report card at the end, no ceremony, no final transcript to compare. Whatever follows this stage, if anything follows, will be shaped by what you've practiced here. You'll step into it, and this part will be over. That's why it's worth paying attention now. If you wait to act until proof arrives, you may wait past your moment. It's like studying only after you've seen the final questions. By then, the class has ended. If there is a test, it's happening every day you breathe. If there isn't, the days still pass, and the choices still carve their mark. It may be strange that something so large could unfold without most people noticing, but if you've stayed with this thought, you've already noticed more than many. You've entertained the idea that your choices might be part of a pattern wider than yourself, that your life's details might not be mere static. Even if you let the theory go after this, the act of wrestling with it has already done its work. What you do with that shift is the part no one else can determine. Will you carry it into the hours ahead? Will you let it guide you when it's easier to look away, when the right choice is the costly one? Will you remember it when the room is crowded or when you believe you're alone? If someone is watching, they'll see your answer in what you do next. If no one is, the people around you will, sometimes in ways you'll never hear about. Either way, the outcome is shaped by the same raw material: what you choose, what you build, what you leave behind. So here you are, wherever you happen to be, morning, evening, a busy street, a quiet room. Time is still moving. This next moment is still yours. There may be a score waiting somewhere you'll never see, or there may only be the lives you touch. In both cases, the question is the same. What kind of mark will you leave on the place you've been given? That question keeps unfolding after the words, stop. It follows you into the routines and surprises of your day. And if you found it worth holding for a while, then you already know what comes next.